Okay, guys, we need to talk about Dr. Claudine Gay, the now former president of Harvard University. She was one of 3 university presidents, all women, mind you, who participated in a gotcha Republican hearing in the House last month that was designed not to illuminate anything about campus anti-Semitism, as Republicans claimed, but rather to put on display for the MAGA base the right's hatred of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, they really hate diversity, which, of course, is the product of the 20th century they hate so much. So everything they do is about removing diversity. The mere presence of anyone who isn't white or male from spaces they think are reserved for white men drives them nuts. And in the wake of that hearing, the right-wing anti-DEI brigade got part of what they wanted. Days later, University of Pennsylvania President Elizabeth Magill announced she was stepping down. But the 2 others, Claudine Gay and MIT President Sally Kornbluth, remained. So naturally, Claudine Gay, the only black woman on the target list, became the focal point of a legion of mediocre men whose mission is to eradicate diverse people from education, from kindergarten through PhD. These men accused Gay of plagiarism. But first, some facts are in order. Harvard University itself never accused Claudine Gay, who got her PhD there, of plagiarism. Nor did they conclude that any issues with her academic citations even amounted to misconduct. As the AP correctly notes, the outrage came not from her academic peers, but rather from her political foes, led by conservatives who put her career under intense scrutiny. And the accusations of plagiarism basically came from one right-wing anti-DEI activist in particular, who faithful readers will remember from this show as the architect of the right's war on critical race theory. Good old Christopher Rufo, a Harvard wannabe and fake intellectual who's perfected a grift of ratcheting up anger about things that make middleweight white dudes like himself, Tucker Carlson, and their ilk very, very angry. You know, things like not being president of Harvard or even getting into Harvard as a student, both of which Claudine Gay has done and Christopher Rufo has not. It is worth noting that he didn't just wage a war against Claudine Gay. He telegraphed every step of what he was really trying to destroy and how he was going to do it. A month before the sham congressional hearing, he tweeted about how to fix academia and said, quote, "Abolish DEI bureaucracies and punish universities that discriminate on the basis of race." He later claimed that Claudine Gay, quote, "quietly built a diversity empire, overseeing a racist admissions program, a sprawling DEI bureaucracy, and an effort to dename buildings and reduce the visual presence of white men on campus." The next day, he straight up admitted that he launched the story of plagiarism accusations in order to topple her. And ultimately, his grifty crusade was successful. Claudine Gay resigned, saying it was in the best interest of Harvard not to focus on any individual. Meanwhile, Rufo is out there gloating about his transparent victory. He told Politico, "I've run the same playbook on critical race theory, on gender ideology, on DEI bureaucracy. This is a universal strategy that can be applied by the right to most issues." And now everyone on the right is high-fiving each other over the successful execution of his plan, which, far from being brilliant or clever, merely requires the other side, and yes, that includes the media, to be hypersensitive, easy marks. And it is important to remember that Claudine Gay's resignation is not an individual story. The attack on her is a symbol of a greater war against the progress of the 20th century, which these men are determined to repeal. It's not just undoing black educational and business progress and banning accurate black history and the boogeyman critical race theory. They want to force women and people of color back into their place, too. Back to the kitchen and the birthing bed, presumably serving and obeying, just like the bad old days that were only good for people like Christopher. Case in point, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's victory in court Tuesday. The far-right Fifth Circuit Federal Court of Appeals has ruled that Texas can ban life-saving emergency abortions and let women die, despite federal guidance requiring hospitals to provide stabilizing care. Paxton has sued the Biden administration over the guidance. There's also the case of Brittany Watts, a black woman in Ohio who miscarried a non-viable pregnancy. A grand jury is now considering whether to indict her under a weaponized interpretation of a state law that prohibits abuse of a corpse. Whether you're a black woman in academia or a pregnant white woman in Texas, the message to you is clear. Know your place. And it's not just right-wing men or even older people. Thanks to the Tucker Carlson effect, it's conservative young folks, too.
They're being fed a lie that is the idea of freedom, that if you choose to have a life married to a man, you choose to stay home and have children, that you are being oppressed, when really we were created to do so.
Feminism is this direct punch against masculinity and the male figure in society.
Once they got that equality, they stopped wanting to be equal to men and wanted to start being superior to men.
The Lord created us for two different roles, and therefore I feel that men are meant to have that role in which they lead us, in not just in our household, but in our faith and just in our country.
Well, if that's the case, dear, you might be surprised to learn that the third highest ranking Republican in the House of Representatives is, in fact, a woman. But at least that woman is doing her bit to help out her brethren on the anti-DEI brigade. Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, a Harvard graduate, led the bogus questioning at that sham hearing last month, claiming credit for Claudine Gay's exit. Late today, Dr. Gay published an op-ed in the New York Times responding to all of this. And after the break, we will tell you what she had to say about the success of the anti-DEI bullying campaign.
Okay, so boom. So Dr. Claudine Gay is Harvard University's first black female president in a 388-year history. And she was just bullied into quitting her job because some people did not like how she responded to one question during a 4-hour back and forth with Congress. So some representatives in Congress had called Dr. Gray, the president of Harvard, the president of MIT, and the president from the University of Pennsylvania to ask them some questions about anti-Semitism on their campus. And so Representative Stefanik had her little mic drop moment, and she was like, okay, ask all three presidents. Okay, cool. So do y'all think that students on your campus should be punished if they ask for the G-diggity of Jews? And so I guess Congress was expecting all three presidents to be like, of course, some people got to go. They up out of here. Peace. Pack your bags, hit the road, Jack. But that's not what happened. All three presidents, in fact, gave the constitutionally appropriate answer of it depends on the context. So after all the conservative haters ran that clip through the mud, Harvard's board was like, okay, cool, y'all can be mad all y'all want to, but we still standing beside Dr. Gay, so y'all gonna have to let that go. And then after that, all of a sudden, the citation police was knocking at Dr. Gay door. So when the citation police pulled up on Dr. Gay, Harvard was like, all right, cool, don't trip. We're going to do an internal investigation and see what's going on, and we're going to go from there. So, mind you, Dr. Gay did get her PhD from Harvard. So anyways, Harvard did a little internal citation investigation or whatever, and I was like, okay, so we ain't going to hold you. It is some places where she probably could have proofread a little better. You know what I'm saying? She probably wrote this piece probably, you know, like the day before it was due or something like that, but it wasn't really nothing in there that's really all that bad, you feel me? And so the stuff that they did find, Dr. Gay was like, okay, cool, like I could fix it, I ain't tripping. And I ain't gonna hold you, citations is not the easiest thing in the world, so I really hope that y'all never go back and look at them papers I turned in law school, because mind you, Dr. Gay is getting hemmed up by the citation police, full of people who I guarantee you have never checked the citation on a poli-sci essay a day in their life. So when Dr. Gay was like, check this out, I'm standing on business, it was some real prominent donors for Harvard University who was like, okay, well, we're not giving the school no more money then. So basically, Dr. Gay put out a letter and was like, you know what, I'm just going to bow down gracefully, and we're just going to leave it at that, and y'all can figure out how y'all want to move from here. And Harvard don't have no replacement for her yet. People always want to talk about how racism and slavery is part of America's dirty history, but it's starting to feel like it's filthy present. Black women in this country always have to be perfect. And then when we do get as close as humanly possible to perfection, it's always some mediocre wet wipe going and digging up our 1 and 2 flaws out the grave. And yet, if we had to go toe-to-toe when it came to real accomplishments, you could never see me. But yet, as soon as we say our name is Kunta and not Toby, all of a sudden we got to humbly quit our jobs, or we got to keep our composure while people who are not even remotely on our level talk to us crazy just so we can get a seat on the Supreme Court. How did they used to say?
Here's what you need to know about the Claudine Gay plagiarism scandal. It's bullshit. Let me explain. Christopher Rufo, he's the guy that started the critical race theory panic. This is his thing. So he dropped this Twitter thread in which he claimed to prove that Claudine Gay had plagiarized her thesis while she was studying for a PhD at Harvard. This supposed bombshell hinges on two claims. First is that Claudine Gay plagiarized her thesis advisor. Here's the thing. Your thesis advisor is your co-author, not some source you found on the internet. Plagiarism is passing off someone else's work as your own work. A thesis advisor knows the difference between their own work and their students' work. That's kind of their job. And there's inevitably a lot of overlap between the professor's work and the student's work. That's the nature of the advisor-advisee relationship. Claudine Gay's thesis advisor, Gary King, knew full well which parts of Claudine Gay's thesis were derived from his work. There is no plausible way that Claudine Gay tried to pass off her thesis advisor's work as her own. Like, it's just stupid. Now, if you point this out to somebody who's already made up their mind that Claudine Gay is a plagiarist, they will immediately pivot to the second claim, which I'll get to in just a second. But first, consider the pivot, because it gives away the whole game. When you point out how ridiculous it is to claim that Claudine Gay plagiarized her thesis advisor on her thesis, I haven't seen anybody try to defend that claim. They just pivot to the other one. What does that tell you? They didn't believe the first claim. They don't believe the second one either. That's not the point. The point is to stack up as many bullshit claims as they can get away with, because most people haven't done grad level writing. They don't have the context to understand the stupidity of the claim. Anyway, the second claim is also from the thesis. Claudine Gay cites some sources to describe the methods that they use as context for her own work. In the course of doing that, she repeats some of the original source verbiage, close to word for word. And of course, Rufo puts the two pieces of text side by side and says, "Look, she didn't cite her source." The fact that there is a citation at the beginning of the paragraph notwithstanding. If you know anybody that's done academic writing, ask them about writing the methods section. That's where you describe the technical details of the research that you did. Here's the thing about highly technical writing. You're trying to describe a set of very specific concepts, a lot of times using terminology that nobody outside your field understands. The number of ways that you can phrase a piece of technical writing and have it still make sense and be accurate is generally pretty small. One of the lines that Rufo highlighted was using 1987 survey data, which is a technical description of a source of data that was used to do some analysis. And as part of Rufo's little op, he pointed out that the original text said using 1987 national sample survey data, and says, "Oh, look, these are basically the same," which is true, but think about this for a second. How many ways can you rephrase that? The study used survey data from 1987. You can't change 1987, right? Because then it wouldn't be accurate. It was survey data, so what are you going to change it to something else? It doesn't work because it's specific. And it's important to convey the specifics in your academic writing. Besides, it's the methods section of the paper, which is not the part that is what you're actually trying to contribute with your research. That comes in the results and conclusions, and arguably also the introduction, not in the methods. The point of the methods is to give a high-level overview of how you got the results you did. Obviously, you include citations so that if someone's reading your paper and they want to know the details of your methods, they look up your citation. Nobody reading that paper is thinking, "Oh, this is what Claudine Gay had to say." No, that's, again, not how it works. So that leads to the, what they think of as their trump card, which is the APA citation guidelines, which clearly say you have to put quoted text in quotes. And that is true. It's true now. It was not true in 1987. You see, 1987, the internet was just getting started, meaning this kind of plagiarism that, academics and all teachers really have to deal with today, it wasn't as big of a thing back then. The APA citation guidelines were developed as kind of a result of the ubiquity of the internet. Lots more opportunities to plagiarize. So my question to Chris Rufo is, could you please show me the citation guidelines that were applicable at Harvard in the political science department in 1997, because those are the citation guidelines that Claudine Gay was supposed to follow, and show me where in those guidelines, where did Claudine Gay not follow those guidelines? Obviously, I'm not going to get an answer, right? Like I said, the entire thing is bullshit. But, and this may or may not surprise you, that hasn't stopped a huge number of people from taking Chris Rufo's claims at face value. They just assume Claudine Gay must have plagiarized her thesis. You got these two pieces of text and they look pretty similar, and they're waving the APA citation guidelines from 20 years after the fact in your face, and it can look like a convincing case till you poke at it a bit and it all falls apart, but nobody bothers to poke at it. Can you guess why? A lot of the people who are kind of assuming this is true, they have internalized biases about, well, particularly black folks, that kind of make them think, oh, well, I guess that's not very surprising. I mean, she is a black woman, president of Harvard. She must have gotten there due to the color of her skin. It's not like she could have come by a PhD honestly. And, to be frank, the color of Claudine Gay's skin is important to her being Harvard president. Harvard's been around for what, 500 years, and she's the first black president? That's valuable to Harvard. And this, she's only published 12 papers. College presidents don't publish papers. They're administrators. So yeah, this whole op just really annoys me because it's so stupid. But what really bothers me is how many people are just sort of like, oh, well, that makes sense, and not realizing that they just got played by Chris Rufo and their own internalized bias.
You want to know something that really infuriates me? 2 weeks ago, I got on Threads and posted about Dr. Claudine Gay, something that I figured was really obvious. Basically that legitimate concerns about anti-Semitism had been co-opted by white nationalists who don't care at all about Jewish people, but definitely care about their long-term agenda to dismantle DEI across the country. And if they can take down the first black woman president of one of our most elite institutions, then they'd be successful. Because if they could do it at Harvard, they could do it anywhere. I don't know. I thought that was really clear. But instead, I got told I hated all Jews. I got told Dr. Claudine Gay hated all Jewish people. And, people just generally parroted right-wing extremist talking points at me like I was crazy. Meanwhile, a white nationalist who is known by other white nationalists for being a highly successful white nationalist broadcasted his white nationalist plan in real time, then celebrated his white nationalist victory with a racist trope to boot, and then asked y'all for money so he could continue on with his white nationalist victories. But I'm crazy? Dr. Claudine Gay, she became enemy number one, not Chris Rufo. Black women, we're the drama? You know what? Throw all of your Listen to Black Women merch away. Because you don't mean it. Unless we are saving you in an election or fighting for affirmative action, which statistically benefited white women the most, or, giving you movement blueprints for your own freedom struggles, you don't actually care what we have to say. Unless we are generally servicing you in some way, shape, or form, you don't want to hear it. So let's stop pretending. Black women have been black women all our lives. Do you really think that none of us know what it means to be the first and or the only in an elite institution? You really think we didn't know exactly what we saw when we were seeing it? Meanwhile, we told you all exactly what was happening, and you told us to shut our mouths. We were out of our depth and we didn't know what we were talking about. And then the white nationalists came along and actually backed us up by giving you all the plan that we told you was afoot all along, and you still didn't believe it. I don't know why we repeat ourselves at this point. I'm not doing it no more. So yeah, just throw the crew necks and the tote bags and the bumper stickers away. Don't hashtag listen to black woman at me anymore. Because the one thing that comes close to making me as incensed as I am that Dr. Claudine Gay was forced to resign in the first place is the fakery. Stop lying to us.
Okay, so I wanted to show those little videos about Claudine Gay because I've been watching this ever since it started happening and it has pissed me off. So I couldn't do a video because I would go on a tirade and no one would have been able to listen to it because I would have been cussing so much, because this is blatant. At this point, I don't want to hear anybody talk about how this nation is not racist. I don't want to hear about inclusion and progression or anything. I am so tired of the BS. This had nothing to do with plagiarism, and what they're doing is they're hiding their anti-blackness and hatred for black people behind the word plagiarism. As you saw in several videos, it talked about where it is difficult, and I know this personally. Anybody who has taken secondary education and did have to write a paper, you know how you had to do your citations, your bibliographies, and everything, and all the information that you had to put in there, and how time consuming it was. And the lady was right, getting it done the day before or even the day it was actually done, so you could get it done. It happens, but nothing amounted to plagiarism. People are going in trying to find a quotation marks or a comma or something that is incriminating. And for you to have to do all this digging to find something incriminating, there's an alternative motive to what you're doing. They do not care about academia. They do not care about credibility in academia. What they see is a black woman. And this black woman is not just any black woman, but she's an unambiguous, dark-skinned black woman with black features, and she is the president. She was put in a position of power in an institution that did use slaves. Now you have a person who looks like those slaves in the presidency. And if you think that didn't send these people who donate, they donate money so their mediocre children, the legacies, can get in underneath their name. They donate a wing, they donate money. So this was done by millionaires and billionaires who donate to Harvard. So what they did was, it had nothing to do with academia. It had to do with, we don't want to see that as president, as the face of Harvard. We would rather see one of our children, one of our people who is colorless as the president. And if you don't do what we say, we're going to pull funding. We're not going to donate to you. You're going to lose a lot of money. We're going to destroy you if you don't do what we say. That's what happened. And then you have this, what the lady called colorless supremacist, who just added on to it, and it was broken down by a man on TikTok that this fool doesn't know what he's talking about. And then when I looked up where he went to school, he wanted to go to Harvard, but he couldn't cut it. He couldn't. So it doubly angers him that a woman, a black woman, is the president. And then multiple times you will see in comments of these butthurt, colorless, whining people that they are talking about her salary of $900,000. She is not supposed to be getting that money. They're not happy that she was made to step down as president, but she has not been fired. She is still at Harvard. She's still a professor, and she still gets the salary that she was making as president. I would say that's a win, but Harvard is, I would say, 50-50 to blame, because they could have stood behind her, which at first they did, but then it wasn't the questions from the Republicans. It was not that. It was the funding for the billionaires. And now you see why legacies make up the majority of the children who get in. Money. And people want to sit up here and talk about affirmative action. They've been saying that, she is a shoo-in for affirmative action, which means that she wasn't good enough to get in, so they made it easier for her. And when you hear people say that, just know that they're dumb. They're dumb. They've never had secondary education, and they don't know what they're talking about. They are just a puppet with somebody's hand up their A, saying whatever CNN, Fox News, or their favorite colorless supremacist says. And this is an all-out war and attack on Black people. This is anti-Blackness, but you see, we don't get a hotline or a bill or anything protecting us from this. This is just fine, because this is the tradition and heart of this nation. This is what they do. This is who their ancestors were. This is who they are. They are showing their A. They can't hold it in anymore. They cannot pretend not to hate us, which I'm not complaining, which I'm tired of the fakeness of it all. And a lot of these people are coming out of the woodwork. But this has nothing to do with plagiarism, because if something needed to be corrected, nobody is perfect. They couldn't even attempt to do as much work as she has done to see the success that she has seen. And it kills them because of who she is. Oh yeah, America is what it's been since 1619, since 1492. You can go back as far as you want. This is who they are. This is who they will always be. This nation has not changed. Modernized, but not changed. And for Black people, I continue to say, don't vote for anyone, because no one has your best interest at heart. Do not do anything for anyone, because no one does anything for you. They expect from you all the support in the world, but they do things like this. You need to protect your peace, relax, chill, don't worry about anything, and let them fight it out. Because what is the use? What is the use? No Democrat, no Republican, no liberal, no conservative, no ally, no nothing is doing anything to make anything better for Black people. So we need to mind our business, stop advocating for people who wouldn't throw a cup of water on you if you were on fire, but they would watch and enjoy and take a piece of your body as a souvenir and tell their children and grandchildren of the story in a gleeful way. But I'll go ahead and leave it right here. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you in the next one.